Hi everyone, my name is Eran and I'm a neurobiologist, but I will tell you today why specifically I'm interested in the gut, how can we use the gut to treat the brain, and what do we do in my lab to better understand the connection between these two unique organ systems. So I think it's been around almost 20 years between the Human Genome Project was completed. I don't know if you remember this huge human achievement of sequencing the whole genome. And since then, we now know today very well which gene does what and how certain genes work together in a connection maybe to certain diseases. However, still this very rapid rise in many diseases in the population is still very evident, in this case in neurological diseases, but we see it also in inflammatory diseases, in metabolic diseases, obesity, psychiatric disorders, and many more. And the question is why? And I think when it comes to biology and medicine, we are all very good at thinking what makes us sick? What are the pathogens, the viruses, the bacteria? What are the cell types involved? What are the mechanisms and the molecules that cause us being sick? But the better question, or the bigger question in my mind, is how? How we live our life in a way that predisposes us to be sick or makes disease susceptibility greater in our unique story. And talking about this how is basically meaning to environment. And environment shape our physiology in many ways. There are sleep-wake cycles, medications, antibiotics, lifestyle, physical activity, diet, what we eat, hygiene, immunity, exposure to different pollutants in the environment. And in some cases, the environment is at least as much important as genetics in shaping our physiology. And environment signals the body through signaling hubs, and at least one of the biggest signaling hubs in the body is the gut, that can sense all this information from the environment and process it and relay it to other organ systems in the body. So the gut is a very unique barrier surface. It has a barrier that is comprised of these structures, the villi. If we zoom in into this very, very large lining of the gut, we see epithelial cells that are very tightly connected, creating this barrier, and the mucus protecting the blood vessels and the tissue underneath from trillions of bacteria that live inside the gut, that generally called the microbiome. And these bacteria can secrete many molecules that they metabolize from the food that we eat, and these molecules can further being absorbed into the bloodstream and reach the brain, where they can change many, many traits of brain cells and how they react to environment. However, there is also the invisible factor, as I call it, age or time. We all age, and aging has a tremendous impact on our gut and therefore also on our way to interact with the environment. Still, nowadays, in 2023, most of the preclinical studies done in animal models are being done on young, healthy mice, for example, that have very, very different blood pressure, susceptibility to disease, glucose levels in the blood, social habits, sleep-waking cycles, and so on and so forth. We use in our lab, when we study stroke, which is a very common disease in aged individual, we study also aged mice or old mice that are almost 2 years old. And we believe that they recapitulate better the biology of an organism which is predisposed to neurological damage. And what we discovered lately, which is very, very surprising, that stroke also affects the gut. This barrier that I mentioned is being breached after the brain damage, leading to higher permeability of the gut. And as a result, bacteria and their components, their molecules, can infiltrate the blood, reach the brain, where they create inflammation that exacerbate the brain damage. So the gut is a very, very important and central organ that affects stroke after brain damage has been occurred. Also, there is a very strong correlation in aged mice between the magnitude of gut permeability after stroke and the damage in the brain. And we also identified special immune cells in the gut that you can see them in red here. This is the mouse. And after we induce stroke in the brain, we see a huge expansion of these immune cells in the gut. They're being activated by these bacterial molecules, and they can also travel the brain where they exacerbate and propagate this inflammatory process that later on leads to further brain damage and injury. So we can even manipulate these cells as a way to treat post-stroke inflammation and to get better results and faster recovery. And overall, thinking about the gut as a therapeutic target, we see that in cases or in neurological diseases like stroke, it's very hard to reach the brain and to manipulate brain cells. But on the other hand, the gut is very accessible, less invasive, and gives us a wider opportunity for therapeutic intervention, and therefore it's a very compelling target to develop new strategies and therapies to modulate the brain in case of a disease. So I would summarize by saying that aging research has just begun, and personally I believe that many of the secrets for healthy longevity lies within the gut. Thank you very much.
Questions?
My name is Max from Tel Aviv University. I wonder, how do you think does this interaction happen? Do you think it's neuropeptides, like more humoral response to the inflammation that happens in the brain, that some neuropeptides or transmitters are released that affect the neuronal cells within the gut? Because it's known that, like, I think the gut harbors more like neuronal cells than the brain itself when we account for all different types of Cajal cells and pacemaker cells in our gut. So how do you think it happens?
It's a great question, yeah, and we study it also in the lab. So the question, if I may repeat it, to see that I understand, how brain damage or brain trauma, or in this case stroke, can affect the gut and cause this elevation in leakiness or permeability. It happens through, and you're right, there are many, many neurons in the gut. It's a very heavily innervated organ. There's the enteric nervous system, where neurons that both the processes and the cell body are in the gut, and they are responsible for contractility and motility of the gut. And but there are also neurons that their cell body sits in the spinal cord or in the brain, and they send the processes to the gut and to other organs. These are the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. And the sympathetic system, specifically using norepinephrine as a neurotransmitter, cause this elevation in permeability. So it's a very fast stress response triggered by the sympathetics, but later on in aged mice, we see that sympathetics remains the same, but the immune response kicks over and leading to this prolonged and sustained leakiness. So it starts with sympathetics, but whether it's recovered or not depends a lot on immune activity.
Well, thank you.
Hi, I'm Slava from Weizmann Institute. It's in Rehovot. I wonder, does it work in the reverse way? Does brain affect the gut? What's your gut feeling?
Yeah, that's exactly what we said now.
But I mean, if you have some mental illness, would your gut be specifically different?
So there's an entire area of research about the psychosomatic effect. This is something that we sometimes relate to psychology, but it is a very characterized organic response where certain cell types in the brain activate certain cell types in the gut, and the connections were lately actually identified and described in a very, very nice cell paper of Asya Rolls from the Technion. So, of course, they can also trigger those cells in the brain. After you've been sick, for example, there are cells in the gut that tells us, I have stomachache, or I feel sick, or I feel nausea, things like that. After the mice or the individuals were being completely healed, if you trigger the same cells in the brain, they report the feeling of being sick again, even without a pathogen.
Hi, Eran. It's Patricia from the Technion. Really great talk. I wanted to ask if I fully understood, you wanted to kind of reduce the inflammation after a stroke through the gut. But I was wondering if it's possible, or if it would be possible to not only treat, but even prevent the fact of a possible stroke, like targeting the gut in this aspect.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and of course it would be super amazing if we could do that. However, there are many, many causes for stroke, hemodynamic causes in blood flow, age, risk factors such as hyperlipidemia, hyperglycemia, lots of things. So it's really hard just to specifically target the gut, a specific pathway in the gut, and claim that or think that it would completely reduce or prevent stroke. We can try many ways to rejuvenate the mucosa lining of the gut. For example, boosting immune or beneficial immune activity in the gut that would cause or would lead to a healthier epithelial surface and would maybe benefit or reduce the risk to get stroke, or at least a severe stroke.
Thank you, Eran.
Thank you.